All right, welcome everyone. Happy Thursday, or sorry, happy Friday. I keep forgetting what day it is, y'all. We made it. We made it to Friday, so I hope everybody's excited as I am for that amazing accomplishment. I'm Meg, and I'm part of Powerfly's virtual hosting team, and I am super excited to be joining you for today's amazing chat and learn. I can't wait to jump in and get started, but before we do, we're going to go over some real quick housekeeping items for all of you. So if you are a Power to Fly frequent flyer with us, apologies, this is all going to be kind of old hat to you, but we'll go through it quickly. One thing that I want all of you to know is that today's events, the events like today don't happen without all of you, without our community members, our amazing talent. We cannot wait to engage with you. So if you are here, especially if you took the time out of your day to be here with us for the live recording, I just want to say thank you, welcome, and we absolutely encourage y'all to participate. So you can do that in a couple different ways. You can always turn your cameras on if you want to share your smiling maskless faces with us safely. You don't have to, so don't feel like there's any pressure, but there's absolutely no need to be insta-perfect. You know, non-traditional workspaces, furry coworkers, 6-day messy buns, child coworkers, all of it is welcomed, accepted. We want to meet you where you are. So please feel free to do so. Now, if you, we kindly ask that you remain on mute today. If you do come off mute, you will show up on the live recording. So that's part of the issue there. But also we want to make sure that we maintain audio clarity on the call for everyone. So unless you're actively speaking, you know, one of our if you're one of our panelists, that's fine. Y'all can stay on unmute. But please make sure that you are on mute if you're not one of the panelists. That's going to help us make sure that the recording is good, as well as the live event for everyone here. Now, you are always welcome to write into the Zoom group chat. You can do that by, you know, we encourage you to do it for a couple different reasons, but mostly it's because we want to know what y'all think. You know, are you really agreeing with what our panelists have to say today? Or is there, you know, do you maybe have a different outlook on the subject? You know, if they were talking about advice and stuff, like, you know, maybe you've heard something else that really works for you. So please feel free to share it with us there in the chat. You're more than welcome to keep it lively and active. We love to see it. Now, this session is being recorded, like I said earlier. We're also live streaming it to our YouTube channel. So hi to everybody watching this on YouTube. So if you know, what all this means is today's session is recorded. So you don't have to feel like you need to, you know, take notes or, you know, worry about that you missed what someone said. You can always go back and review the recording. So everyone that registered for today's session, regardless of whether you come or not, even if you just drop in for 5 minutes and then bounce, that's all right. Everyone's going to get an email from us in about 1 to 2 business days. So early next week, you'll get it. And it'll have a link to where you can rewatch this recording on Powerfly's website. Now, if Corey or Carrie says something today that is just mind-blowing, you cannot wait to share it with a friend or a coworker or a relative. Hey, you laugh, but I sit through these all the time, and there is always at least one of those moments for me every single chat, swear. So, you know, if that's, you know, if you just can't wait to share this, you don't have to. You can always go over to our YouTube channel. I'll share the link to that in a little bit as well. But you can always go over there, grab the recording. You can also see on our website and on our YouTube channel a bunch of past recordings of other chats we've had. So feel free to, you know, peruse through those. They're all free to access. So, you know, please feel free. And you can also keep up with us. You know, I recommend you subscribe to that YouTube channel because that's going to keep you up to date on events like today. But you can also follow us on various social media channels. We are at Power to Fly on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, in addition to YouTube. So please feel free to take photos or video as we go today. You know, tweet out to your friends or let your social network know that you're learning with Power to Fly. You know, the more people we can tell about these resources and the more we can spread them, hopefully the better we can, you know, the better we can make work a place to be for everyone. So thank you all for you know, jumping in today and being here for us. All right, so last but not least, our guests here are here today on behalf of CHG Healthcare. Now I'm going to share the link that you see, or sorry, I'm going to share the link to the to their company page. It's going to look like what you see in front of you. Let's see, no, there we go. So what do you need to know about that page is a couple things. You know, that's where you can learn more about CHG. You can get information on their benefits, events that they've participated in with us, or events that they're going to do in the future. But you can also check out their open roles there. Now, if you are listening along and you start getting real interested in CHG, check out those open roles. But if there's nothing there that really suits you, or that, maybe you're not actively seeking right now, you just want to kind of know what's out there, I recommend that when you get to this page, at the top right-hand corner, there's going to be a button that says it's either follow or I'm interested. I'll look it up, but I know the dev team was, making some really cool tweaks to the website last week. So if you click that button, it's going to put you on CHG's follow network, which does a lot of really cool things for you. But effectively what it does is it works like your friend at the company. So it's going to keep you on CHG's radar even before you fill out an application. And it's going to let you know when they post new roles. So it's a really good way to make sure that you don't miss out on some great opportunity, but also that they're already aware that you are a person that's interested in them. So definitely take advantage of that. You can follow and unfollow as many companies as you want, but obviously we recommend you check out CHG Healthcare. Now, I'm really excited to introduce our speakers to you today. So first up, we have Kerry Norman joining us. Kerry is a Senior Vice President of People and Operations at CHG Healthcare in Salt Lake City, Utah. In this role, she leads a variety of teams, including the talent management, operational services, real estate and workplace, and financial operations groups. Now, prior to joining CHG in 2017, she had 17 years at the Capital Group companies in Los Angeles in a variety of those HR leadership roles. She previously was a talent acquisition leader at FedEx, and she started her career at Prudential Financial in their Accelerated Leadership Development Program. Kerry holds a BA from Boston College in economics, and we are so happy to have you with us today, Kerry. Is there anything you'd like to add to this amazing bio that you think our audience should know about you?
Well, I am just so happy to be here with my friend and colleague, Corey. So it's like the Corey and Kerry hour, or the Kerry and Corey hour. And let me just tell you a little bit something about myself personally, since you saw the professional stuff. I don't know about the rest of you on this call here today, but I have been binge watching the Olympics. I just can't get enough of it. I love seeing these athletes go and achieve the impossible. And being that I live in the Salt Lake City area, I am so hoping that we get a Winter Olympics back here, maybe in 10 years, because I'll have to take a couple of weeks off on vacation and be like a hospitality tent host or something, right? Because I just want to be like there in the spirit, seeing it live.
Well, and that would be a really cool thing, because I know it's been a while since I looked into this at all, but I know they're looking to make maybe like a rotating set of host cities for the Olympics, because, infrastructure costs, all that kind of stuff. And that would be really cool, because I remember watching the Salt Lake City Olympics, and it was really, really neat.
Yeah, it sure was.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Kerry, for sharing that with us. So joining Kerry today is going to be Corey Daniels. Corey is the Director of Talent Acquisition for CHG Healthcare in Florida. Corey joined them 10 years ago, and during his tenure, he's grown from a sales consultant to a sales leader, and now leads a very dynamic team of talent acquisition professionals who specialize in sales and leadership recruiting across the country. Now, Corey plays a strong hand in guiding CHG's recruitment, internship programs, marketing, talent outreach, onboarding, and DEI efforts. So he kind of has a finger in everything that's going on. And Corey is very passionate about creating an inclusive environment in the workplace, which is, one of the many reasons why we love working with CHG, because their people are just as committed, to the same goals that Power to Fly is. And we're so happy to see that. Corey, is there anything you'd like to add to your bio before we jump into the meat and potatoes of today's event?
Well, I just want to say thank you for having me. It's an honor to kind of be here and speak to everyone today. I don't know, other than my bio, I'm originally from Chicago. I'm practically a Floridian by now, because I've been here almost as long as I've been in Chicago, but I do like to point that out. And I actually like spending a lot of my time where Kerry is in Salt Lake City, because I'm an avid skier. So I love to ski. So we're not getting a lot of snow this year, so I haven't been out there much, but typically that's where you can find me during the winter.
Totally true. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And hopefully you'll get some nice snow, sometime soon, so you can take advantage of that before winter is officially over. So yeah. Okay. So I see a bunch of people starting to share in the chat thread and say hi and whatever. That's awesome. Let us know where you're joining us from. I see Jackie's coming in from Columbus, Ohio. I'm just north of you in Toledo. Obviously, Corey is coming to us from Florida, and Kerry from Utah. So please feel free to let us know. I'm always really interested to see how far our global audience spreads during these events. Now, last but not least, before we go into our questions today, I just want to highlight for all y'all, some of the principal themes that we're going to discuss in today's conversation. Now, we identified these both by looking at questions that y'all submitted ahead of today's session, as well as by talking with Kerry and Corey about, what high points they wanted to make sure we all took away from today's event. Now, we're going to try and work through a better understanding of equity as a whole, not just in terms of salary, because obviously salary is a huge part of it, but we're going to break down, kind of the different aspects that you want to be aware of. We're going to talk about some tips for job seekers to help them negotiate their salary, because I don't know about you, I'm always incredibly intimidated during that process, as well as some tips for recruiters to advocate for that equity from the start. So I love that we're going to kind of address it from both sides here. So as we dive into the questions, let's start with one that we were asked a whole lot. Could you tell us a little bit about why this topic is important to each of you? Because I feel like people come to this topic for a variety of reasons. And sometimes, I feel like there's a lot of options, but I'm interested to see where your interest stems from. So Kerry, would you like to kick us off here?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. For me, this topic is highly personal, and then it crosses over into my professional life and the responsibility I feel that I have for others. So when I think back over my career, I would say I've worked in a lot of different industries, some of which have been pretty male-dominated fields. And so I found myself oftentimes as the only female in the room at my level, and it started to make me feel a sense of responsibility to help not just other women, but quite frankly, any underrepresented group in the workforce. And now I sit here as the mother of a daughter who's 17 years old, who'll be going to college, getting her first job in the workforce. And the topic of equity is on my mind because I have to say, things like gender and minority pay gaps have been just really stubbornly hard to close. It's hard for me to still be talking about this 20 years after I first started talking about it. And I just think it's time for our country, the world, all the institutions that we belong to just value the work and the worth of all people. And it's not just the right thing to do to be a truly inclusive workplace. It leads to better business results too. So for me, it's deeply personal.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Kerry, because you're right. Pay equity, I feel like at least recently has been a lot about the gender pay gap, right? But that exists, like that idea that pay gap exists in many, many different segments of, the workplace demographic. You see it from everything from, people, I would say men with children making more money than men without. It's certainly true when it comes to, Black and brown people that there's going to be wild inequities there, which we obviously need to fix as soon as possible. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Sure.
Corey, how about you? What really led you into being passionate about this idea of pay equity?
Yeah, so first off, ditto on everything that Kerry mentioned. For me, in my seat, in my particular role with CHG, I oversee, part of the talent acquisition division, and our team, we want to make sure that we are serving as advocates for, anybody who's coming in the door, candidate wise to interview for positions that we have. Obviously, I want to make sure that they feel like they're getting fair pay when we compare to market. And then also when I think about when our candidates and new hires get inside our four walls, there's always that kind of water cooler talk. Hey, what do you make? What do you make? There's nothing worse than hearing that somebody in the same position, like role is, and there's a huge pay difference. Like it's gut wrenching, right? So for us, we want to make sure that there's pay equity because it improves morale, it improves engagement. We're really big on our folks being engaged and happy. It leads to higher job satisfaction and just overall just unite. We're united as a team. We feel like we're going to work and we're getting paid fairly, and that doesn't need to be a topic of conversation every day where you're going in and you're like, why is this person making more than me, because they're a male or this color or that color. So that's why it's important to me.
Thank you so much. It's very nice to hear from somebody who potentially could be on the benefit end of things like more pay for working fathers, that kind of stuff. Like it's very good to hear that there's people from multiple usually very mistreated demographics when it comes to things like pay. So thank you both for joining us today. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what equity means when we're talking about pay equity. Carrie, I want to direct this one to you because we're looking to try and unpack some of those common factors that contribute to that inequality. So let's start with the first. What are we talking about when we talk about pay equity?
Well, the way I think about pay equity is equal pay for equal contribution. Now, that doesn't mean that every person in the same role is going to make the exact same salary. There are things like experience and performance and expertise and scope that come into play. So for example, when I look at our organization and I think about a position that we have people in, you do need to often differentiate if someone has a lot more, let's say, functional expertise that they're bringing, or there are cases where someone can be sitting in the same title, but one person has a lot more job scope, let's say, than another. And I do believe in pay for performance as well. So those who contribute more, in my mind, should be paid more for that impact. So there's a meritocracy factor as well. But like what an organization really needs to do is work really hard to balance pay equity and the employee performance and contribution piece of that. And it's an art and it's a science. And I can talk a little bit later about some of the things that we've done to try to achieve that. But fundamentally, that's how I define equity.
Okay, so I love that kind of breaking it down. It helps put us all on the same page. What do you think are some of those common factors that really play into creating this inequity?
There are a lot, and I've been trying to unpack these for a while now with the help from others that I work with. I like to believe that people have positive intent. So I know that there are sometimes plain old biases out there, some of which we're even unaware of, and we're always going to have to work hard to mitigate those biases. But if you start from a place of people want to have good intent, I think there are a couple of main factors that can contribute to pay inequality, and I see them show up in kind of the everyday work that I do. One of them is just honestly a lack of leader education or understanding when they're making pay decisions. And then I think on the flip side of that, sometimes a lack of, call it understanding, call it confidence about how each of us can talk about or advocate for ourselves, around pay or other issues. Now, with women in particular, and I live in Utah, so I'm actually part of a number of organizations that are trying to address this specific to the gender issue. We do have other things like women stepping out of the workforce for family obligations that can put them on an unequal playing field. There's a stereotype out there. I'm going to just say it is a stereotype. This doesn't apply to all women, but some women have trouble negotiating and advocating for more pay. And if you aren't doing that, and when the offer gets made, you sort of fall behind then as you come into the organization compared to your male counterparts. And then we noticed a trend at CHG, which was interesting to me, where women actually tend to stay longer with our organization and are very dedicated to growing internally. And that's a great thing, right? Whereas some of the men were moving around, either more within our organization or leaving and having multiple job changes. And so that contributed to men's pay growing at a faster rate than women who are staying with us internally and growing their pay more steadily and slowly. So we've actually taken some great action to try to address that within our workforce. But those are some of the things that kind of come to my mind. Would be interested, Corey, if there are other factors that come to yours.
No, I would actually agree with everything you said. Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add to it.
I absolutely love the points you made, Carrie, because you're right. There's different reasons why, by and large, men or men identifying people, get certain advantages. And you're right, that's something that the idea of kind of leveling up your pay more quickly and more efficiently via job transfer is something that has been, I think, pretty well known for a lot of people for at least, 5 or 7 years. But it was definitely not something that I was ever told about. It was something that I kind of had to witness. And you're right. There's also the huge factor of what level of training your manager has in this. There's a lot of people that are in management that maybe shouldn't be, or maybe should be better equipped to be that manager. And so it can feel really weird when you're up against a power dynamic like that.
Yeah.
And the person that's supposed to be knowing everything maybe it doesn't know all the different ways that this could be working a little more easily or better for people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And we've got people in the chat here, like, sharing, links to articles they've written, all kinds of stuff. So thank you, all of you. Please feel free to share those. Jocelyn, I can't wait to read that blog that you wrote. So thank you for sharing that link there. All right, Corey, my next question is for you. What can a job seeker do to ensure that they're getting paid what they're worth? I know that, I think that something a lot of us hear is about how, like, right before you accept an offer, that's kind of the most power that you have, the most in charge you are of kind of negotiating your worth is highest to the company. But it also feels really weird, right? Because most of us need the jobs we're getting offered. So
Yep.
what do you think that job seekers should know, or what can they do in this process?
Well, I think first off, if we're talking about current day, I think it's important to know that it is totally a candidate's market right now, right? So I feel like in a lot of these cases, you're definitely in the driver's seat. You want to definitely educate yourself on market pay ranges for the position that you're seeking for. Make sure you understand the different job titles that go along with the position that you're seeking. There's tons of information right now out there to help us uncover what pay ranges are for any position out there. I would say utilize various websites. I know, like salary.com and Glassdoor, Indeed, websites like that all have information related to pay ranges for specific to the job that you're seeking. So go check those out to make sure you land where you need to be. And the other thing is making sure you create your bottom line pay rate once you uncover the ranges based on your salary, your experience. Based on your experience, whether it be schooling, any kind of certifications, anything like that. Uncover and what you think you're worth. Another app that you could use is I was on the App Store a couple weeks ago, and I found an app called Fishbowl that's pretty unique. For the most part, it's like a blog base, but you have people from various companies that have insight on what their company's pay ranges look like, and there's good information on there. So I would encourage you to check that out.
Oh, I like that. Thank you.
Yeah. Lastly, there's a lot of legislature going on right now in various states regarding equal pay, equal work acts. And this is important because a lot of states are now requiring companies to list pay ranges when they post job openings. So I'd encourage you to go on, you can simply go on Google, like pay range disclosure requirements by state. And you'll see various articles pop up, USA Today, CNBC, and just kind of sort through those articles. You'll see what states are required to list pay ranges. That will help you. But yeah, so that would be my advice.
Yeah. Okay. Now, just personal, like, aside on this, or like, kind of follow-up question. When people are thinking of things like that, think about what you're worth, figure out what your value add is and add tax to it, all that kind of stuff. Is this a time when they should also be thinking about things like benefits or, additional items that would contribute to, like, equitable compensation or equitable benefits? Is that something that plays into this, or should we really just focus today's talk on, like, the dollar figures?
No, absolutely. It all matters. Benefits included, PTO, all of it. At the end of the day, they all add up to dollars. Somebody's paying for them, right?
Yeah.
So it's definitely a good idea to take it all into consideration.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I agree with that totally, Corey. I mean, I think you have to know what your why is, and there's lots of things you're going to want to get out of your your work opportunity, compensation being an important one. But we all are living in a world that's so different today than it was even a couple of years ago, and thinking about things like flexibility that you need, or benefits that support integration of your work in your life. I mean, one of the things that changed for me a lot as a leader over the last year is that I don't feel like I'm just looking out for people's work experience. I'm trying to look out for their life experience. And a lot of the ways companies are designing their total rewards program syncs to that. So I think really thinking about the full package is important, and knowing what you want, and don't be afraid afraid to, make your choice set based on what matters most to you and your family and loved ones.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. If you don't ask for what you actually want, and I feel like, basic negotiating tells you to ask for a little bit more just in case, but unless you are upfront about what you want, it's going to be really hard to make sure that not only is there a compromise being happening there, but also, it's going to be really hard to get anywhere near what you want if you're not going to tell people that that's what you're aiming for, whether it's accommodations like having flexible hours or building in, set break times to your day so that you can, step away or take a walk or whatever, working with an employer on stuff like that that's kind of invaluable to something like job satisfaction. So yeah, absolutely. Okay, so back to you, Corey. So if we're job seeking, obviously, I think I know the answer to this, but I want your answer. Should we accept the first offer that we get from a company?
Great question. I would tell you, my short answer would be no. Well, I guess it just depends on the situation.
I love it depends because I came from a legal background and it depends is the answer for everything. So yeah, break this down. What does it depend on?
Yeah, and I'm viewing this in terms of, should I counter offer? Is that kind of what you're
I think so.
towards?
Yeah, I think that's what the question is designed to.
Okay, so my short answer would be, yeah, you should counter offer. I think especially in today's market, it never hurts if it's done correctly, right? Before negotiating any kind of offer, I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's very important to make sure that you've done your research, your market research, and also before interviewing, like I mentioned earlier, know what you're looking for in an offer, right? If you don't know those two things, it's going to be very hard for you to negotiate. The how part, whether it's in person or you're sending an email, it's important to point out that how you ask is important, right? Tone, wording. You don't want to be demanding. You want to make sure that it's, a positive tone and you're almost like suggesting or asking. And then when you are asking, I think in any job that we, are considering taking, there's always some give and take, right? Like, hey, one job's not gonna have everything you're looking for. So when you're negotiating, I think it's important to point out like, hey, these are the things that I was looking for in a new company and in an offer. I'm sacrificing, these few things because I love your company. But the one thing that I do need is, for the compensation to come up a little bit, right? But I am going to sacrifice, whether it be I'm getting less PTO, or maybe I'm paying more personally for benefits per month, or maybe it's a longer commute, or it could be a number of things, right? But I think it's good to point out like, hey, I'm giving up something too in this negotiation, right? You want to make sure that you're able to rationalize why you're asking, for more money, right? Base it on market research, whether or not you have any sort of professional certifications, that could, be a good reason for you to get more money. And I think one of the easiest ones that I feel like everybody can kind of relate to that, in my position, and Carrie just mentioned a little bit, like your personal life, it's always just okay to say hey, this is what I need to satisfy my living expenses, right? Just from a human element, if I don't have this, I can't live the lifestyle that I've been living. So that's another good reason. The one that I probably like to save for last is leveraging, right? A lot of candidates right now are interviewing with multiple companies, right? Fielding multiple offers. And you got to be careful. I know it's easy to think, oh, I'm just going to play one company off another and get the most that I can. And yeah, you're in a market right now where you can do that, but you can also lose a good offer if you do it the wrong way. So leveraging is a way that you could negotiate, but just be careful on how you do it. Another thing is, at the end of the day, if you don't get, you're negotiating and you're not getting anywhere in terms of, base pay. We mentioned earlier, total rewards package, right? Look at other things that you could possibly ask for in terms of maybe it's PTO, or maybe it's a sign-on bonus, or maybe you can say, hey, I'll come in at this rate, but Can we put something in writing or agree that in 3 or 6 months, whatever time period it is, we can revisit my comp based on my performance, right? Just so you don't close the door and feel like you've completely lost out. So those are kind of my tips.
And on a personal note, get it in writing.
Yes,
I did exactly
get it in
that with a
writing.
job, but did it with a handshake, and thought like, oh, this will be fine. It was not fine. It was not fine. I got hosed. So don't get hosed. Like, get it in writing. And it's not a big ask either. If somebody's like trying to do this like all cash and stuff, it's fine to be like, can we just put that in writing? That'd be really great. Can you send me an email just to document that? That would be awesome. And if they won't, put it in an email per what we discussed today, blah, 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 and send it. Because at minimum, you've got at least something to be like, yeah, we were going to discuss this, but we haven't. So you have something to be able to kind of hold their feet to the fire a little bit. Just
absolutely
learn from my many missteps.
Yeah, I love how you're looking out for yourself, Meg. That's great.
Well, the thing, you live, you learn, and this is, hopefully people don't have to learn the way I did. So, yeah, I love that. Okay, so, and we've got great people sharing comments in the chat thread here. Mac is saying to always counter offer. They were able to get $13,000 over the listed salary for their current role. Erica had a really great point saying, I love to remind a potential employer of all the positive attributes that we just discussed in the interview. Just reminding them of my skill sets has been very helpful. So I think that is absolutely great. Please keep sharing those tips. Anything that you've done that's worked for you, more help, and the more we kind of crowdsource all of this, the better. It's great. Okay, so Carrie, I know that you were talking about how you have all managed to achieve pay equity at CHG Healthcare, which is no easy feat. I'd love to hear more about the framework that you use to accomplish this. Could you expand on that a little for us?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And let me just say, it's an ongoing commitment. It's not a once and done, you did it and you celebrate and you move on. You really have to make it a habit. And, we have had good success at CHG to the point now where we have actually no statistically significant pay gaps by gender or by ethnicity. But I would say my advice would be start at the foundation. Like, don't just go solve the problem of pay. You have to ask yourself the question, how did we get here in the first place? And, it could be that there's some unconscious bias going on. Could be that leaders don't understand, how to do comp planning. Maybe there's something around your job framework. Sometimes companies group a lot of positions with a huge variety of skills and performance all into one role, which makes it kind of hard to really, slice it more thinly and address pay. And there also could be some just gaps within your hiring process and how you're setting starting pay that then, become a problem down the road. So think about, where you need to start and get to the bottom of that why. And then I would say it kind of comes down to two things in my mind: a framework that's based on education and some good structure. And by the way, if you can invest in a really good comp team and good comp data, then that's, the cherry on the top. So we've worked really hard on the education front. We run like compensation 101, 201 types of sessions to help all of our leaders really understand all the elements of compensation and how to make good decisions, whether it's merit decisions annually, bonus decisions, when do you do a market equity adjustment for someone? So a lot of just education to help them be better equipped, with how they're thinking about making compensation calls. And then just a ton of partnership between our leaders and our compensation team members as they're making pay decisions. And we partner a lot too with our recruiting team. So our comp team, works really closely with Corey and his folks just to make sure that we're addressing, any wage issues right from the start with making very competitive offers. And then we do have, this is a little more technical, but indulge me for just a moment. We have some regular audits that we run to really identify if we have any areas of the business where a pay gap issue may be more pervasive than others. And then we work hard to remedy it. So what that looks like is annually, we look at pay across all of our employees within every pay grade. And we look at the average pay, we look at the median by gender and by ethnicity. And if we see a gap, then we work with the leaders to try to address it. And we don't waste our time waiting either. Like we'll do mid-cycle types of adjustments if we need to bump up people's pay. For example, this employment market has been so hot that we were noticing, especially in a lot of our digital roles and our engineering roles, we were bringing people in higher than people we had internally with us, who had similar or even less experience in some cases. So we worked really closely with our finance team to make sure that we earmarked enough money within the budgeting process to go after that pretty aggressively, because you don't want to have a situation where your longer term employees are feeling like they're less valued and not paid fairly compared to new people. So, we do a lot of work just throughout the year to stay on top of it. And it really helps too if you've got the support from the top. Which will be like the last point maybe I'll make. If you don't have an executive team that cares about this, it's hard to like pull it all through. And so our executive team believes in pay equality. What measures gets done, as I like to say. So we put a lot of good structure and commitment around it, and we try to take a really long-term view and not let ourselves fall behind.
Yes, absolutely. I love the idea of, kind of continuously revisiting this. Like it's definitely something that, like you said, it's not just a set it and forget it thing. And we also had some really good chiming in from the chat, people saying, you could also advocate for pay equity based on lived experience or their identity. People of color, women, trans individuals, these are all groups that have been historically underrepresented and marginalized in the workforce. So I absolutely agree with what's being said both by Kerry as well as what's in the chat. Thank you all.
Yeah, I think that's a great call out, and we need to every day take an even wider view of it. And and one other thing, beyond salary, you got to look at all your non-salary options too, whether it's how you pay bonuses, or if you're a company that offers equity, are you being fair with how you're granting that? Do your benefits work for the diversity of your workforce? So there's a lot of different ways to look at this, but if you don't do it, I think it's really hard to be an employer of choice these days. So it's super important work.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we've talked a little bit about, how we can kind of measure that equitable pay and what companies should be looking at internally. Is there anything in that we didn't get to yet before we want to move on to our next question? I think we're good. Okay. I just wanted to be double sure. This was a really good question. I wanted to make sure that we explored it, and not didn't cut anything out. All right. So, Kerry, what do you recommend if people find themselves making less than a coworker doing the same job? I know that, when I was coming up, like I'm 35 and I still was told, like, you do not discuss salary. You don't discuss pay with people. And I don't know if I'm sure this is probably more American too, because we are very weird about money. But it was only I think 4 years ago, I was talking to one of my coworkers about this, and they were like under the impression that it was illegal to talk about pay at work.
Wow.
And that sucks, So what does, what do you recommend that people do if they find themselves in this position?
Yeah, I love this question. I actually found myself in this situation at one point in my career. And here's what I did, and maybe some advice that I'd share with the rest of you. You do have to talk about pay. I know it can feel uncomfortable, but there's nothing worse than pushing it under the rug and having it continue to, kind of bother you. So, my advice would be start by first just maintaining the proper perspective. Like, it can be an emotional topic. And as a result of that, it's very easy to start comparing yourself to other people. And sometimes in doing that, you make some assumptions and you start to tell yourself some stories. So I would say take a practical approach. Think about, are your responsibilities matching with other individuals? Do you have the same experience? Do your research. We talked about tools that exist outside of your company, online, good data points. But also, if you have a comp team or you have someone you trust inside the company, talk with them and get a little bit of a dry run going for yourself to ask for your leader to look at your salary or a potential increase in the right way. And I feel like the right way to do that is to make sure you're focused on your contributions and the impact that you're making, and kind of lead off by just being really honest. What I did was just say to my leader, I'm a little concerned that I'm not being paid competitive to the market. And how do you view it? And when you think about my contributions and the value I bring to this organization, and how do you think about, the way in which you make pay decisions? And it really opened up, a great dialogue, and it was really, it led to a great outcome. And actually, Corey, you and I had a conversation like this maybe like a year ago,
Yeah,
right?
we did. Yep,
So
absolutely.
I try to do the same, for the people that work for me, because I had a leader who, responded really well when I brought it up
Yeah.
with them.
And I think I agree with everything you said. And I just want to point out, like, how you handle this will determine the outcome. If you go in and you're pointing the finger and you're saying, why does this person make more than me? And you're doing all of that, it's not going to happen. It's not going to end up where you want it to end up. So like Carrie said, just focus on yourself, do your research. And I've literally, if I have employees send me literally a 2-page email on why they should be making more or why they should be promoted, but it was all about them. And it's just like, when you get something like that and I go through it, I'm like, well, man, like, how can I even argue with them? Like, they're right. And you'll find this typically happens with folks that have been in a position for a while, right? It's because market, it just fluctuates, right? We're going through it right now. The market is absolutely crazy. It's driven up income across the board in various positions. So if you have someone that's been sitting in a seat for, 5-6 years, and they haven't been getting steady merit increases, right? You're going to have someone who's like, man, people are, like Carrie mentioned, people are getting hired that are making more than me. So that's when you typically have it. So just go in and talk about yourself. Point out all the things that you've done, right, to make an impact, a positive impact on the company, how you've grown, and you'll give yourself a better chance.
Yeah, one last thing I would say, I remember someone giving me this advice a long time ago, because I was afraid that, like, if I talked about myself, it would sound like bragging. And this leader told me, it's not bragging if it's true.
Mm-hmm.
True.
Was that Yogi Berra? It's not bragging if it's fact.
Could
I'm
be,
definitely
I don't
dating
know.
myself with that one, probably, but yeah. And I can't agree with you strongly enough. And you're right, Corey. It's largely about how you handle it, which can feel kind of sucky. But trying to keep that distance for yourself, like, stay civil, try and keep it as unemotional as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But just one thing to flag, just in case y'all are, maybe I wasn't super clear, it is not illegal to talk to people about your pay. What's illegal is forcing someone to talk to you about their pay. So one of the things, if you're going to have these conversations, just make sure that whoever you're having them with is fine, is, they're okay with, like, I've had this conversation with people, like coworkers, where I've said, like, hey, I am fine with telling you how much I make. Don't make that feel like you have to tell me now. It's okay. Just, something, to discuss. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about, you versus that other person who might be making more than you. Them making more just tells you that their negotiation with the company went differently than yours. So that's okay. That's not something that puts blame on anybody. You just need to go back to the company and, do what Carrie and Corey have been telling you. All right. So when we're bringing those conversations to the table, like Corey had said, you like, if you stick to your guns, you have facts, or you have, like, things to back up, like, hey, this is what I need, or this is why I'm worth more. Always, always, always helpful. So we only have 15 minutes left in today's session. So I want to make sure we're able to get to as many questions as possible. So I'm going to try and keep us moving, but, please let us know in the chat how you're taking all of this information in. Are there things that you've tried that have worked for you, or maybe like me, you've made some mistakes and don't want people to repeat those. So yeah, please feel free to share those with us in the chat. Now, Corey, if as a recruiter, how can recruiters help generate that fairness when they're negotiating with candidates?
That's a great question, actually. So I really think that it depends on what the structure is for making hiring decisions within your organization, right? If I think about our organization, TA serves as sort of, obviously we go out, we find great talent, and we're kind of the facilitator, right? We interview people, we pass them on to our hiring leaders if we feel like they're a good fit, but ultimately hiring leaders take our advice in most cases, but they're in charge of making that final decision. So I think it's very important to make sure whoever within your organization is the decision maker is educated on what market conditions are, right? And what fair market pay is for the position that you're that you're hiring for. That's number one. So if you're a recruiter and somebody else is in charge, just make sure before you even put the rec out or post a job, you get with your comp team, you figure out what pay ranges are, go out, do a little bit of research, market, and then sit down and have a talk about, what an offer should look like, should, you guys extend one. On the other side of it, if a candidate makes a counter offer at any point, you also want to make sure that you seek to understand like why they're counter offering. Make sure you get as much detail as possible. That way you can gather the decision makers again and kind of talk through. I think the worst thing somebody wants to hear is a decision maker, somebody making a counter offer, and they're like, hey, they want $8,000 more. Okay, well, why? I don't know. They feel like they're worth 8,000 more. Like that's not good enough, and you're not going to be a good advocate for that candidate. So make sure that you're getting enough detail as to why it makes sense to you, and you're like, you know what, this is something that I can pitch, and then you go and you try to advocate for them. So it's not always going to come out where you're getting it for them, but at least you'll build a strong case. What we do see a lot, and one of the girls in our compensation department remind me of this. We see a lot of candidates that we meet with, and you start talking about compensation, and it's like, well, as recruiters, you're almost trained to like say, hey, like find out what they're making at their current job, right? And let that be the basis for what we make as an offer, which is the absolute wrong way to go about it, for a few different reasons. If you think about where that person is coming from and their tenure there, maybe they're not getting paid what market value is, right? So all you're doing is you're not helping them in any way, shape, or form by saying, oh, okay, you make 60,000 at your current place, that's what we'll try to get you here. No, you want to make sure that obviously research is done, listen to your comp team, and you want to make them a fair current market offer, right? And that is not always what they're making at their current job. So make sure that, whomever you're working with candidate-wise as a recruiter, that's not what you're using.
Okay, so we talked about, what you can do as a recruiter for this. If you're a recruiter and this maybe is not something that's been maybe a facet or a factor within your recruiting, like your workflow or your process, how can you advocate? How can you make that switch? Especially if you're not changing companies or you're not starting in a new role. How can you make that change to advocate for employees' equity from the start if that's not something that was already like an ingrained part of, let's say, the company's way that they want you to recruit people?
Carrie, I'm going to let you take a stab at this one.
I think it's being, as an organization, very transparent about how you make pay decisions, because I think it gets back to the education piece. Like if you can just if you publish your salary ranges for roles and people understand even where they are in that range, that alone I think opens up a conversation that, because you're being that honest and open with your framework, that people can come back and say, I'd like to talk a little bit more about either how you make these kinds of decisions or what it means for me personally. So I think transparency around compensation choices that the organization makes is key. I think it gets back a little bit to leaders have to lead here. Like It's so much easier when a leader sits down, and even just once a year, let's say, and goes through like, here are all the elements of your compensation and how it all kind of rolls together, and spends the time asking proactively, how do you feel about it? Do you feel like you're paid fairly for the value you're bringing? Like opening the door even that much, certainly helps. Now, I know not all leaders are going to do that, or not all companies are going to be that maybe upfront about it. But, then I think, there's certainly even support and advocacy that we can provide through a toolkit to get people like to know how to, have an open, honest conversation, with someone they trust. Hopefully, if it's not HR and it's not their leader, it's at least with some other person of influence within the organization, so that they can be a good ally to that individual.
Now, I know this is going to be probably another it depends question, and it's just something that occurred to me now. So if it's not something we want to talk about, that's okay. Just brush me off. We'll keep moving. But one of the things that I was thinking about while you were talking was, the idea that I love the idea of transparency, right? And not every company is going to have that. But would you agree, in your opinion at least, that if a company's not willing to at least like kind of pull back the curtain a little bit on how they make their pay decisions, should that be a little bit of a red flag to people? Because I mean, this is not, I've worked for a lot of companies. I have a very weird work history, but I've never had a company that was transparent, was like, hey, here's not even like, here's the range we're willing to pay for this job, or here's like how your bonus structure is going to work. It was dealt with in a lot of very weird ways. So is that something that, is that kind of a red flag for people, or is that not really how we should think of these kinds of things if we were to ask for that transparency?
Well, I'll give you my opinion. I mean, for me, let's just say I value organizations that are honest and open about these kinds of things. So when I look for a place to work, I look for a place that, values its people. And part of that, I think, is being willing and open to talk about these things. So that doesn't mean that everyone gets to see what everybody else makes. I think it's more philosophically, I personally want to work at a place that is treating me, in a place that engenders trust, and for me that is I guess something that I would look for, as I go through an interviewing process. It's about the relationship I want to have with this organization, and that's how I view it. Corey, what would you say?
Yeah, I think for me it would be a little bit of a red flag for sure. I value transparency as well. And again, I agree with Carrie, as long as we're keeping it to me, like I'm not asking what everybody else is making, but to ask for a range and a little bit of color on why I fell, or where I fall on that range is helpful for me, right? Because then from there you can start talking about like, hey, here's where I can see you growing to. Like if you can accomplish this, this, and this is how you can move up in that range, right? It could lead to a bigger conversation. And if I can get my mind wrapped around that, and especially from, my leader telling me like, hey, here, full transparency, here's where you are. But guess what? Like you can get to where you want to get to. And this is the work that you have to do. Like that makes sense to me. And that's something I'd appreciate. And I'd, do my best to just work my butt off to try to get to what we're outlining. So
yeah, I mean, I think you said it well, Corey, because you're reminding me of the fact that, there's financial growth people want, but career growth in general, I think should be important to all of us. However that shows up, sometimes it's promotion, sometimes it's through additional, opportunity, development we receive, the rewards, the recognition we get. And so I just want to work for a company that cares enough about that they're willing to, to kind of paint a good picture, because then we'll all give that extra, I think, a bit of ourselves to achieve great things.
I like that. And one thing to remind everybody, because I feel like we've kind of hit on this idea a couple of times, but not only like asking those questions is something that employees should do for themselves. It can be scary, whatever, but like you really should look at this as something that can benefit you. But just because a company is willing to be transparent, like you're asking the questions is important, but like listen to the answers. I remember a couple jobs ago, I was in a period where they decided to be much more transparent about things like the pay breakdown, or why they thought we had competitive wages. And one of the things that kind of came to light as a result of that was the company that I worked for was basically like tacking on the perceived value of like your health insurance onto your pay scale. So it's like, oh, you should think that the insurance that we take out of your paycheck, that's worth like, you take like 3 figures, but it's worth 5. You should really consider that as something that you're making from us. And it's like, no. Okay. That's how you feel about it. All right. Now I see how you actually value and think of when it comes to fair compensation. And it wasn't a great thing to learn, but it was better than working for that company another couple of years and not knowing that that's, what it was part of their equation.
Yeah, interesting.
I agree with what you just said. That's very true, and that's something. I will tell you though, like, and we do this once a year as a company. We do get a statement that gives us like our total rewards, if you will. And I like seeing that. I would never want it included in my
Oh
pay
yeah.
grade, in my ranges, of course. But I do like seeing like total, like, because that's pretty eye-opening for me. So
Oh yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Because there's
absolutely.
stuff that was on there that I did not really think of adding as
Yeah.
adding value.
Yep.
But then I looked at it and I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Hmm.
Which is part of why I would like,
Absolutely.
if the whole doc had been like, you bonkers, like that would have been one thing. But like seeing the like, okay, I'm good
Yeah.
with this, good with this. Whoa, wait a
Yeah.
minute, what? Like,
Absolutely.
yeah,
It's like
like
I,
you
I
gotta
said
pay
earlier,
attention.
everything adds up to dollars. Somebody's paying for it. So
Oh, of course,
yeah,
yeah.
it's cool to see. Yep.
Absolutely. Okay, so we have about 5 minutes left. I know that this always goes really quickly, but one of the things that I wanted to make sure we got to today was this slide that you'll see in front of you. What we did is we posed these questions to Corey and Carrie prior to today's session. These are all going to be answers around CHG healthcare. But I want to kind of dig in a little bit so we can hear a little bit more about what you both love about this company. So you described the culture as people-centric and motivating. Is there anything like, do you want to break down maybe like how that motivation occurs, like what forms it takes, if there's, team activities, company-wide stuff, how does that, how does CHG create that motivating culture for their workers?
That's a
Yeah.
great question.
You
Oh, you
wanna?
go ahead, Corey.
Okay, so I'll go first. So, like I said, I've been here almost 11 years, and the motivating part of that was me. Um, there have been, if I had to count them, it'd be less than 10 over the last almost 11 years where I have not been like ready to hop out of bed and go to work. We work with like the most amazing people. I will tell you that our culture here is like bar none. Although we're in healthcare, we're also considered a sales organization too. So I started off on the sales side, and I mean, you're around people that are just super motivating. They're go-getters. They wake up every day, going out trying to find physicians to send to a hospital or an urgent care facility that needs them desperately. And literally, they don't stop until they find somebody. And for me, that motivates me. Although I'm sitting here doing, my talent acquisition stuff here on the ninth floor, three floors above me, there's hundreds of recruiters literally pounding the phones and trying to find people. That's motivating for me. So I put that just because I know the amount of work and effort that goes into what we do here and what people bring to the table every day, and that's inspiring for me. So I that's why I put motivating.
Oh, I love that, Corey.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to top what you just said with such authenticity. I mean, what I would say is I worked at several companies before coming here that had great cultures. And what drew me to CHG though is just how much we focus on putting people first. I mean, it really is the essence of our business strategy, and we believe that if we have engaged and satisfied people who stay here, that it contributes to our success. And our mission connects with me so personally because we are, sending healthcare workers out there to deliver patient care. I mean, certainly at a time during a pandemic too, our mission just really, rang close to my heart. But we have this fighting and caring spirit that you see show up in how we go about our work, and it's a very relationship-driven business. And I get to work with tremendous colleagues that push me to be my best self, which is super duper motivating for me.
I love that. Okay, so let's skip down to the bottom one here. What are your top tips for someone who's interviewing? And are these tips, intended for CHG specifically, or are these tips that you think are applicable to, interviewing in general? Carrie, do you want to go first, and then Corey, you can wrap it up?
I'd be happy to. In fact, Corey and I synced pretty well on the response to this one. Like, I really do encourage people. I know it's hard because you get a little nervous, but be yourself. Like, you really want to be thinking about like whether or not the person you truly are is going to be the person that the organization, wants to see every day. And I think lots of times when people are interviewing, they're trying to sell themselves. And put your best foot forward, but absolutely talk about, the things that you bring to the table, but, make sure that you're entering into, an organization that's going to, bring your best self out and not make you try to be somebody else. So that's why I feel like it's really important to be authentic.
Yep.
Yeah.
Love it. So for me, a little peek behind the curtain, if you will. Um, I will tell you that, like, so for our organization, like I kind of went over how we're structured. TA recruiter will do a pre-screen interview. We pass on to, so after the hiring leaders interview, we actually all get together and sit down and have what we call a feedback session in most divisions, or there's some sort of, digital feedback session. But across the board, what we always hear, and typically while we're passing on somebody, if I, as a recruiter, am sending you through our process, it's because I saw something in you that fits, whether it be the culture is one thing that we will never, it has to be there, the culture piece. But then I saw something in you that would make you a good fit for the team that I'm sending you to, the division. And most times when hiring leaders give us feedback, what our feedback it's not matching, right? So we've been doing something pretty interesting lately where we'll take you through the process, and then when you get to the hiring leader, the recruiter that you interviewed with will actually sit in and barge on your interview with the hiring leader. And you'd be surprised how many times they come back and they're like, it's like a different person interviewing. I don't know, why did I send that person through? They weren't doing that during my interview. So that's
Right.
why I said lose the nervousness, be yourself. You have to be consistent when you're interviewing. Most places that you're interviewing for, you're going through some sort of, there's whether it be 2-3 rounds of interviews, you have to be consistent. And a lot of times what will happen is if you're nervous, you lose the consistency, right? And when I say consistency, I mean your energy level, the way that you're answering your questions, right? You have to be consistent. And if you're not, it's probably going to lead to you not getting hired, because now you're going to say, hey, why'd you send this person through? And it's not matching up, right? Because you lost it somewhere through the process where you I don't know if you got bored or you're tired.
Yeah.
There's different things that can play into it, but just don't be nervous and be consistent and be yourself.
I
So
love that.
yeah.
Thank you. Thanks to you both.
Mhm.
All right, we are a minute over on time. Apologies. I try to stick as close to time so we can respect people's calendars. So we'll get you out of here quick. I just want to say a huge thank you to both of you, Corey. This has been wonderful to get to spend the afternoon, kind of getting to know you both and learning some more about this amazing topic. So thank you to both of you. This was absolutely wonderful. And a huge thank you to our attendees as well. Y'all put in some amazing stuff in the chat. Thank you so much for sharing that info, for your chiming in about things that you've experienced. I love to see that participation. It always makes these events so much more impactful. So thank you all for that. That's going to wrap us up for today. But I just want to say, have a happy Friday. If you're new to Power to Fly, maybe this is your first event with us, thank you so much for joining us. We can't wait to see you again. Hopefully you'll join us for another amazing Power to Fly event before long. And again, if you're one of our frequent flyers, thanks so much for coming. We were so happy to see you, and we can't wait to see you again. Have a nice Friday, good weekend, safe, happy, healthy, everybody, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you,
Have a great
Meg.
weekend,
Thanks, Carrie.
everyone.
Have a good
Thanks,
weekend.
Meg. Thanks, Corey.